Okay, well,
there you go.
Thank you so much for being with me today. The title of my talk today is Good and Bad Electromagnetic Fields, How to Protect Ourselves Against the Bad EMFs and Exploit the Power of the Good EMFs. And I thank the Integrative Health Alliance and the American Osteopathic Society of Rheumatic Diseases for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to acknowledge the priceless help of the organizers for this meeting and this opportunity. Also, I wish to thank all those who will have the patience to listen to this presentation. As usual, the advisory that no information in this talk is presented as medical advice, and the standard of care for any disease must be followed, as well as rules and regulations established by health authorities of each country. I hope that somebody will be listening to this presentation from abroad, so please do not run into troubles. I'd like to disclose my conflict of interest because I am the inventor of a number of supplements and I developed the approaches and the products described in this talk. Please allow me to introduce myself. I obtained my MD in 1980, I'm 65 right now, and later on a PhD in molecular biology. I served in the Army, part of the North Atlantic Alliance or NATO, as Lieutenant Medical Officer in 1982-83. Then I worked as postdoc at Barrows Wellcome since 1984 in North Carolina, and later as visiting scientist at the National Cancer Institute of the NIH in Bethesda since 1987. Later on, I went back to Italy. I was appointed professor of molecular biology, first associate professor, then I got tenure, full professor at the University of Firenze, where I was born. I started working as a professor in 1992, and I worked over there until my retirement in 2014. I have a specialization in diagnostic radiology, and I published more than 240 scientific articles, co-authored, among others, by scientists such as Eduardo Lapetina, Stu Aronson, Jackie Pierce, Peter Duesberg, Henry Bauer, the late Jeff Bradstreet, and my good friend Dietrich Klingart. One of my articles in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the USA was sponsored by Nobel laureate Sir John Vane. My current research interests are in immunotherapy, quantum biology, and microbiome medicine. For about 40 years, since the time when I was in the Army, I studied the biological effects of different types of energy, ranging from static magnetic fields, like those in MRI machines, to ionizing and non-ionizing radiations like those that we use in radiology and ultrasounds. And I studied these energies on normal and transformed, that is cancer cells in culture, in embryos and in organisms, with particular reference to changes in signal transduction, second messengers and so on, gene expression, cell morphology, and clinical responses. Here on the left, you can see a list of my scientific articles dealing precisely with these topics. And if you Google my name on Google Scholar, you can find all those 240 articles, including some very recent on ultrasonography, neuro-COVID-19, or a novel theory of consciousness. As I said, there are good and bad EMFs. Just like there are good and bad microbes, good and bad viruses, good and bad EMFs. Here we are witnessing a paradigm shift. Let's think about microbes or bacteria, for example. Until recently, just the word microbe or bacteria was synonymous or synonym of disease. As a matter of fact, as of today, you find advertisements that wanted to kill 99.99% of microbes. And if it is true that there are some microbes that are responsible for diseases, it is also true that we are only 10% humans, because 90% of the cells in our body are microbial cells. So we know about the microbiome, and we wanted to keep our microbiome healthy with the use of prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. So, there are good microbes, the vast majority of them, bad microbes, a minority. And the same holds true for viruses. We are in 2021. Now it's almost 2 years that we are surrounded by this dreadful COVID-19, this virus. But viruses are all around and inside our bodies. We have 330 trillion viruses in our human virome, in our body. And again, the vast majority of viruses are very helpful. They support our health. There is a minority of viruses that, of course, they cause disease, and we have to fight them in one way or the other. And the same holds true for EMFs. When we think about bad EMFs, we think, of course, of ionizing radiations, Chernobyl, Fukushima, or radiation coming from nuclear blasts. We think about smart meters, not ionizing radiation, but nevertheless radiation. So we think about 5G, a number of examples of bad EMFs. But of course, there are good EMFs. Without the light and the heat from the sun, there would be no life on Earth. So these are very good EMFs coming from outside. And actually, biological organisms are able to convert this energy into biological energy through the process of photosynthesis that will be mentioned later on, and a number of other processes that allow life on Earth. But maybe most interesting and somehow novel are the endogenous EMFs, that is, those electromagnetic fields that we produce from inside. We do produce EMFs. Actually, our DNA is like an antenna, a fractal cavity resonator, universal sensing and fractal antenna behavior, as this article published about 4 years ago says. And here it says that DNA structure behaves as a fractal antenna, which can interact with the EMF over a wide range of frequencies. So our DNA transmits and receives EMFs all the time. This article is even more intriguing because DNA as an antenna for cosmic emissions, a driving force in evolution and energy transmission. So we are producing EMFs from our DNA, but not only that. For example, the cells of our body, they know where they have to go during development and during regular physiology, because they use endogenous electric fields, that is the electric fields that we produce, as a guiding cue for migration, so they know exactly where to go. And even more interesting is the EMFs that are produced inside our brains. This article was published about 7 years ago. Most of the articles that I show today can be retrieved from PubMed. So we're talking about solid, hard, mainstream science, and not fringe conspiracy theories. So this article describes the origins of the brain's endogenous EMF and the relationship to provisions of consciousness. The fact that our brain produces EMFs is so well known, so well assessed, that there is a branch of radiology or imaging that is called magnetoencephalography. That is, we are able to detect, record, analyze, and interpret the magnetic fields that are around our heads in this very moment. If I put here those devices for magnetic electroencephalography, you can actually somehow read my thinking, not exactly as you see in science fiction movies, but close to that, because in this very moment, since I'm talking, since I'm concentrating on what I'm saying, even worse, I'm trying to translate, because in my brain, the phrases, they're formed in Italian, my mother tongue, and then I have to simultaneously translate them. So I don't know which sets of neurons are firing in this moment, hopefully in synchronicity. Nevertheless, you could, by analyzing the electromagnetic fields that are here around my head, somehow interpret what I'm saying. So there is a branch of radiology and neurology that studies the endogenous EMFs generating inside our brains. And from a deeper perspective, we are EMFs because of the well-known wave-particle duality. So we have a particle nature, but we also have an EMF nature. Problem is, or point is, that we are very big things, definitely bigger and heavier than the Planck mass. And because of this, our wavelength is very, very short, shorter than Planck length, shorter than the Schwarzschild radius. That is a scale at which the current theories of physics break down and or need to be replaced by more general ones. So in other words, just like microbes, just like viruses, the vast majority of EMFs are of good nature. We produce them. They're essential for our lives. So we have to find a way to defend ourselves from the bad EMFs at the same time without running the risk of interfering with the incredible number of good EMFs that surround us and that we are generating and are essential for our life, our well-being. Then there is also this very interesting concept. Being a radiologist, I'm fascinated by the fact that some threshold or some dose of radiation is actually good for our health. This is the concept or hypothesis of radiation hormesis. Is the hypothesis that low doses of ionizing radiation, just the X-rays or the radioactive decay or those coming from radioactive decay, are beneficial because they stimulate the activation of repair mechanisms that protect against disease. And these repair mechanisms are not activated in the absence of ionizing radiation. So there is this concept that a little bit of ionizing radiations are actually good for our health. And what about the interaction between EMFs and the microbiome? As I said at the beginning, and now we realize that we are only 10% humans, 90% of the cells in our bodies are microbial cells. And even worse, and even more interesting, if you prefer, 99% of the genes in our bodies are microbial genes. So we're only 1% or less humans if we look at DNA. So what do the microbes have to do with the EMFs? Well, microbes, they also use EMFs. This article was published again years ago, so we're talking about well-sedimented, well-assessed science. Bacteria use brain-like bursts of electricity to communicate. And this leads to a rather recent but not so old article that I published together with a colleague of mine from Italy, Dr. Stefano Terini, in the Encyclopedia of Cancer. Encyclopedia of Cancer is called the Bible of Cancer, and you publish there only by invitation. You're invited. We were invited to publish a chapter on electromagnetic fields and cancer. And in this chapter, for the very first time, we propose that some of the nefarious effects of EMFs are actuated through the microbiome. In other words, if you check, for example, if you take my cell phone, and if you check whether my cell phone does something to my human cells, most likely you will see little, if anything. And this has been the principle that has guided most of the regulations, if not all over the world. So essentially, scientists have checked whether EMFs coming from cell towers or from cell phones or from smart meters or whatever else, they do something to human cells. And in most cases, they did not find any significant damage. And because of this, they concluded that these EMFs are harmless. Point is that they may be harmless for the human cells of ours, but they may be not for the microbial cells of ours. And knowing that the microbiome is responsible for the development and function of all organs, from the immune system to the brain, we have microbes inside our brains. That's well assessed now. It was a kind of anathema years ago, but now we know that our brains are not sterile. We have a brain microbiota. So the EMFs might be relatively harmless for the human cells of ours, but they may not be harmless for the microbial cells of ours. So this opens a completely new perspective, and this is a field that has to be investigated in the future, as we propose here in this article published in the Encyclopedia of Cancer in 2017. So it is based on all these concepts that I developed this new tool that comes under the form of a capsule of a supplement. It is classified as a supplement called Presidium, that actually it is kind of an inner armor or an inner shield, something that protects us from the inside. So it is not like a Faraday cage that surrounds us and shields us from the electromagnetic fields, would be very unpractical. Is not one of those devices that pretend to shield us from EMFs. This is something that works from the inside. The science behind this tool has been published in the American Journal of Immunology in this year, 2021. You can download the scientific article for free, and you can go into the details. Here in this article, I wrote the following. The results presented in this study, that is in the article, lay the foundation for the development of a novel approach to protection against electromagnetic fields comprising ionizing X-rays, gamma rays, and non-ionizing radiations, 5G, smart meters, so on. In silico observations and preliminary results on subjects exposed to common EMFs under real-life conditions support the hypothesis that co-culture of radiation-resistant cyanobacterium probiotics, I shall explain later what these things are, may confer protection against the harmful effects of EMFs. And here in this slide, I underline or highlight harmful, because this tool of ours does not interfere with the good EMFs, but only protects us from the harmful effects of the bad EMFs. How does it do? And what are the advantages of having an inner shield instead of a Faraday cage that surrounds us and prevents any EMF to come in contact with our body? How does it protect against the harmful effects of bad EMFs at the same time maintaining all the benefits of the good EMFs? It does so because it works by filtering the effects of EMFs. The damage inflicted by bad EMFs is reverted and repaired. And of course, it goes without saying that good EMFs not only do not cause any damage, but they cause some good effects in our cells. So only the damage is reverted and repaired. The benefits of the good EMFs, like for example, the photosynthesis, are therefore maximized. And what's interesting is that its efficacy is independent of the characteristics of the EMF. And this is very important when you're dealing with EMF or EMF hypersensitivity, because in most cases, you do not know which of the innumerable EMFs that surround us is responsible for the symptoms that are reported by the patient. Also, it is interesting that not being necessary to know the characteristics of the EMF, you can counteract those unexplained health incidents that go by the name of Havana syndrome. This is another topic that we can discuss another time. So this approach of ours is composed, or it is constituted by 4 elements. And now I shall proceed explaining these 4 elements. Element number 1, Arthrospira platensis, or spirulina. This is a common probiotic known for centuries, known to protect against radiation sickness, known to NASA up to the point that it is part of nutrition of astronauts. Why? Because astronauts, they are not protected by the shield constituted by the atmosphere. So they are exposed to ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiations coming from the suns and from the cosmos in general. And the Arthrospira or spirulina is used by NASA as part of the nutrition of the astronauts. Why? Because it is a bacterium that is extremely resistant to ionizing radiations. Computations on the lethal doses that killed humans inside the concrete structure in Nagasaki, Japan, following the blast, nuclear blast, evidenced that this bacterium is about 2,000 times more resistant than human cells, because it survives exposure to gamma rays up to 6,400 gray units. The gray are units of radiation. And for comparison, a human are killed by only 3 grays. So this bacterium is 2,000 times more resistant than humans to the killing effects of gamma rays, and of course, even more resistant to all other EMFs. But what's interesting is that this bacterium not only is so extremely resistant to the killing effects of radiations, but it also is a photosynthetic bacterium. In other words, it is one of those living organisms that is able to transform the light coming from the sun into biological energy. So essentially it works like plants do, that is able to intercept with its antennae the light, and it is able to transform this into biological energy. Where does the light come from in our mixture, in our product? The light comes from a special type of water where there is a natural Cherenkov radiation. What is the Cherenkov radiation? The Cherenkov radiation occurs when something, in particular a charged particle, goes faster than light. I'm sure that you are aware of the fact that nothing can go faster than light in this universe. Otherwise, all the laws of relativity would be reverted, at time would flow backward, and all types of paradoxes would ensue. But if this is absolutely true, nothing goes faster than light in a vacuum. What about light in media, in particular in water? Well, things they can go faster than light in water, and when this occurs, you have this bluish light that is called Cherenkov radiation, known for decades, maybe more than 100 years. Now, the Cherenkov radiation occurs in the particular water that we are using in our preparation, and the Cherenkov radiation is able to induce photosynthesis in the arthrospira. Now, photosynthesis is a quantum phenomenon. So photosynthesis, it's not only a biochemical phenomenon, it's a quantum phenomenon. We know about quantum biology today and quantum medicine, and we know that quantum effects underlie an enzyme function, olfaction, photosynthesis, magnetodetection, and aviation navigation in birds. Can I go ahead? I hear.
Yeah, I think we got it. Sorry.
Okay, wonderful. No problem. So photosynthesis is a quantum phenomenon, and quantum phenomena are entangled. I don't know if you're aware of the famous Schrödinger's cat, the cat that was alive and dead at the same time because of these oddities of quantum physics. Well, that was just an experimental, thought experiment. But the quantum bacterium is an experimental reality, because as it was written in this article in Scientific American, today we're talking about the Schrödinger's bacterium, because we know that light, in our case, Cherenkov radiation, that is a form of light, can entangle bigger things than particles like bacteria. So we have a phenomenon of entanglement between the arthrospira and the second element of our product, of our tool, a particular proprietary probiotic blend that we developed in Switzerland in our Swiss laboratories. This probiotic blend is unique because a scientific research published in peer-reviewed articles demonstrated that it has a powerful detoxifying effect. Now, we published in 2 different articles that, again, you can retrieve from search engines dedicated to science. One has been published in the Madrid Journal of Immunology and the other in the American Journal of Immunology, where we demonstrated that this probiotic blend of ours is able to detox the body from a number of toxicants, both hydrophobic and non-hydrophobic, metal and non-metal, ranging from glyphosate to perchlorate to cadmium, lead, and barium, and a number of other things that are too difficult to pronounce. So essentially, this probiotic blend of ours is very, very effective in detoxifying the body of toxicants of all types, and in particular of metals. Why metals? Why it is important in the context of protection against electromagnetic fields? Well, just try to take one of your old DVD or CD and put it in a microwave oven, and you see what happens. And what happens, it is because of the electrical discharge through its metal film. So essentially, metal ions inside our cells, inside our bodies, they work as amplifiers of the damage inflicted by EMFs. Even EMFs that would be harmless in other conditions, they become harmful in the presence of metal contamination of our cells. And it is sad to admit that we are all heavily contaminated with metals. There are studies demonstrating that the umbilical cord of newborns, there is heavy contamination of metals, and not only in some places like in mining towns. There are several copper mining towns in Arizona. Not only in those places, even in most pristine areas of the globe, unfortunately, there is metal contamination. So the metals in our bodies, they act as amplifiers or magnifiers of the harmful effects of EMFs. That's why the fact that this probiotic blend of ours eliminates the metals comes as a very useful help in the fight against EMFs, because it eliminates one of the causes of amplification of the harmful effects of EMFs. The probiotic blend is unique also because we have demonstrated that it has a very rich biodiversity. If you go to your local grocery store and you look for a probiotic, you can find no more than 5 or 6 different strains in that probiotic. We have more than 300 different microbial DNAs, that is different strains in our probiotic, including, of course, the probiotic microbes like the bifidobacterium, the lactobacillus, but also bacteriophages that are the healthy viruses of the microbes, and plasmids that are circular pieces of DNA that transfer information from one bacterium to the other. Also, this has been published. These are the 2 articles where all the microbes, all the bacteria, all the phages, and the plasmids are listed. One is published in the Journal of Neurology and Stroke, and the other in the Madrid Journal of Immunology. And here I'd like to draw your attention to just one particular phage taken as example, the Lactococcus phage UL36, of which we have not 1, but 3 iterations in our product. Why this phage is important? Because it codes for a protein that is called SAC, that is homologous to a human recombination protein called RAD52, where RAD stands for radiation protection. So essentially, this phage codes for a protein that is an ancestor of our protein, of one of our proteins that protect ourselves against the damage inflicted by ionizing and non-ionizing radiations. And by being there, it induces the expression of the human gene coding for RAD52. So this virus, that is a bacterial virus, helps our bodies to synthesize the protein, the human protein that protects ourselves against the harmful effects of radiations. The mechanism of entanglement and transfer of radiation resistance between the Arthrospira, the Lactococcus, the phages, and the human cells have all been described in detail in this article that has been posted in bioRxiv. Actually, this was posted 1 year ago in 2020, and you can retrieve it, you can read it, you can download it. It's very long, very technical. I would also say very boring. But here you find all the information about the entanglement. In short, in the product that derives from these studies, Presidium, the entanglement occurs between the electron clouds of amino acid sequences. Here they are reported, for example, those of Arthrospira, of one probiotic, the Lactococcus lactis, of the human radiation-resistant proteins, and the phage UL36. That's the way we analyze these homologies. So the entanglement between the electron clouds of and the amino acid sequences of the proteins that are responsible for radiation resistance that show a significant degree of similarity. Similar amino acids are depicted in gray. Hydrophobic amino acids, hydrophobic residues are depicted in indigo. Now, why hydrophobic residues are important? Because around hydrophobic residues, around the hydrophobic structures, you have the formation of water clusters. And this leads us to the following slide, because resistance to radiations and quantum entanglement between organisms transferring this resistance or radiation occurs in water. This was very elegantly demonstrated. So this is the third element, water. Very elegantly demonstrated 3 years ago by Canadian researchers describing how biological entanglement confers radiation resistance in fish. So fish, we are talking about big organisms, not bacteria. So big fish like the rainbow trout or like the zebrafish. Zebrafish is rather small, but still is a well-formed fish, very much used in genetic studies. So they describe here how biological and quantum entanglement is responsible for the transfer of radiation resistance between fish. So radiation resistance quantum entanglement occurs in water. And let's talk about this peculiar water of ours. First of all, let me tell you that there are only 2 sources in the world where you can find water with these features. And all the characteristics of the water have been thoroughly described in the article posted in bioRxiv that I showed you before. And we are lucky enough that one of these sources is very, very close to our Swiss lab, so we were lucky. And this water has been known since antiquity. Leonardo da Vinci visited the source to sample the town's miraculous water. At that time, Leonardo didn't know about structured water, didn't know about Cherenkov radiation, but the health properties of this water were known for centuries, if not millennia. So we source this water from the pristine Swiss Alps, I would say, and this water is very unique and it is very instrumental for this product of ours. Why? Well, as I said, it has a natural Cherenkov radiation, but also it has something to do with structured water. As I said before we began, I don't know how familiar are you with this concept of structured water, but structured water went from being considered a hoax or something only for charlatans to something very serious. And now you find articles again in PubMed describing, for example, the effects on animals of structured water. This was published in 2021, or 1 year ago, a critical review of experimental findings and theories between the exclusion zone phenomena that are at the basis of structured water. So structured water is something very solid, very real. And if you go to Google and look for structured water and electromagnetic fields, you find that it has already been observed that structured water can actually protect against the harmful effects of EMFs. Now, let's go into some detail. It is well known that water can store the information of molecules, the memory of water. For example, Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier has demonstrated, and again, also this is published in PubMed, in a journal that is stored in PubMed. He has demonstrated that DNA imprints its information in water by inducing electromagnetic waves, memory of water. So molecules, in particular bioactive molecules, they imprint their biological information in water molecules. And the information stays there even when the molecules are gone. So that's a kind of interesting, known for centuries, but only very recently demonstrated using modern experimental tools. However, and this is much less known, and this is where the originality of our approach lays, also the opposite is true. Because water imprints its information on molecules by changing their conformation or shape. This article was published in a journal of physics and chemistry. Molecules change shape when wet. Because if it is true that molecules imprint water, it is also true the opposite and could not be otherwise. That is, water changes the shape or conformation, as we say in chemistry, of molecules. With Presidium, we exploit this latter, lesser known phenomenon, as it is explained in the next slide. I apologize, this slide is long and boring, but I had to write all these things because I know that I'm dealing with rather difficult concepts. In our preparation, we have hydrophobic molecules, like those that I've shown you before. Silica of vegetal origin that I shall describe in the next couple of slides. Cherenkov radiation. All these things give rise to highly structured water. So the water that we have from the source in the Alps is not structured in itself. It has natural Cherenkov radiation, however, And when we add the hydrophobic molecules and the silica, becomes highly structured. And this water has a much greater degree of structure than the common preparations of structured water that you can find even on Amazon. Our structured water induces, sorry, here there is a mistake, induces conformational changes in the biological active molecules of Presidium, thus making them more effective and bioavailable. So the water changes the molecules. But Presidium is a capsule, so it is not something to drink, because then we go on with a proprietary procedure, because we freeze the mixture of structured water and biological active molecules using a patented proprietary procedure under vacuum. And freezing leads to formation of hexagonal ice crystals that surround the structures of water and molecules described above. And this constitutes a further layer of structuration. Then we eliminate the water. We don't need the water any longer. The water has already done its work because it has already, the structured water has already shaped the molecules. So we eliminate the water to the process of sublimation in high vacuum. Again, very sophisticated tools, equipment in the Swiss laboratory. By doing so, we increase the concentration by a factor at least of 14 of the biological active molecules whose conformation had been shaped by the structured water. The modified conformation of the biological active molecules is retained. And when these molecules are introduced in the aqueous environment of the body, that is when you swallow the pill, they give rise inside the body through structured water, as demonstrated in the next slides by ultrasonography of the brain. Now, let me tell you that this is something absolutely new, is something that has never been shown before. So many people claim they are having structured water. Many people claim their structured water is doing something. Nobody has ever shown that structured water or something that causes the formation inside our bodies of structured water actually does so. We are the first to be able to show with objective proof that this is actually what occurs. That when you take this product of ours, structured water is formed inside our bodies and in particular inside our brains. Ultrasonography of the brain. This is a technique that belongs to radiology. I perfected this technique since 2013, when I was still working at the University of Florence, Italy, when we were studying the temporal lobes of the human and non-human primates. So to work to compare why essentially we speak and they don't. So, but this is another line of research. And also together with the late Dr. Jeff Bradstreet and Dr. Pacini, actually Professor Pacini in those times, we applied this technique to the study of autism. So ultrasonography of the brain is a well-established technique to study the brain. Before I show you the next slide, let me tell you this. Structured water, or when water is structured, is more reflective. In technical words, it has a higher acoustic impedance, and in ultrasonography, this translates in whiter shades. So essentially, if you have regular water, the ultrasonographic image is black. If you have structured water, it is whiter. So the following slide is an absolute premiere, has never been shown before, simply because the results came only a few days ago. So these are the temporal lobes of a subject before on the left and after taking the supplement. What are these things? These are the skin. Actually, these are the temporal lobes. So we are applying the probe here in this area on the temple. So this is the skin. This is subcutaneous tissue. This is the temporalis muscle, the one that moves when you do like this. This white line is the temporalis bone. Here you have up until here the meninges, and from here to here you have the cortex, the gray matter. This area here is the subarachnoid space. Now, it was very difficult to obtain two exactly comparable images in the same anatomical area, because ultrasonography is not like X-rays that you can actually recognize the different structures. Here it is more difficult, but fortunately, having these calipers, we could compare exactly the same areas of the brain. So just look at the shade of gray of this column here. Again, here we are in the cortex, in the gray matter. These are neurons. And look, please, at this column. This is a column that is a structural functioning unit of our brain. So look at the gray here. Now look at the gray in the same column here, much, much wider. Why it is wider? Simply because here you have structured water. Our human body is 90% water, and this is well known. And this is much wider. This column is much wider, same identical column between these three calipers is much wider because here you have structured water. So this is the very first demonstration that you can induce the formation of structured water, endogenous structured water, extracellular as well as intracellular structured water in the brain as well as in the other organs of the body, in this case, using this approach of ours. And now let's move to the fourth element, the silica of vegetal origin, the Equisetum arvense or horsetail. The Equisetum arvense is a perennial plant. We use an extract. It has been known for years and years that Equisetum arvense has a number of health supporting properties: antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antifungal, blood vessel relaxant, neuro and cardioprotective, anti-proliferative properties. But this is not the main reason why we use the Equisetum in our preparation. We use it because it has silica. Vegetal silica. Actually, silica is a mineral, but it comes from biological transformation by the plant. And silica plays a fundamental role in the co-culture of the arthrospira and the probiotic blend because it favors the horizontal gene transfer between the radio-resistant arthrospira and the microbes of the probiotic blend, and also because it stabilizes DNA. Also, it has antioxidant properties that counteract the oxidative stress caused by radiations. And in this context, synergizes with the arthrospira and with the phages of the probiotic blend, because also these components, they have antioxidant properties. And let's remember that the damage inflicted by radiations is due to oxidative stress. To summarize, in our Swiss laboratories, we culture arthrospira in a special water endowed with natural Cherenkov radiation. This stimulates photosynthesis as well as radiation defense mechanism in arthrospira, kind of a radiation hormesis for microbes. Photosynthesis leads to quantum entanglement with the microbes of the probiotic blend that are co-cultured with the arthrospira in the special water, as well as with the human proteins responsible for radiation resistance once the product is introduced in our bodies. The transfer of information, that is radiation resistance, is achieved through plasmids, phages, classic biochemical reactions, as well as quantum entanglement between the electron clouds of the hydrophobic amino acid sequences, sharing high similarity between the proteins responsible for resistance of humans, of arthrospira, of probiotics and phages. The silica from Equisetum helps stabilizing DNA and favor transfer of information. The detoxifying properties of the probiotic blend help eliminating metal and non-metal toxicants that amplify the harmful effects of the EMFs. The antioxidant properties of all the components of the presidium help mitigating the oxidative stress that is the mechanism through which EMFs exert biological damage. And finally, our procedure leads to formation of structured water that amplifies the properties of the molecules responsible for radiation resistance. And it also leads to formation of structured water inside our bodies, as demonstrated by ultrasonography of the brain. This is the big question mark. All this may sound interesting. To me, it's fascinating, but at the end of the day, what is important is the following. Does it work? can we demonstrate that it works with objective tools, with objective measures? I've already shown you the objective demonstration that you form structured water inside your brains and inside all your bodies when you take this product. But what about real protection against EMFs? How can we assess, how can we objectively demonstrate that it protects us from the harmful effects of EMFs? As I wrote here, we have evidence that subjects exposed to common EMFs under real-life conditions benefit from this approach, from this product of ours. And let me tell you that I presented some of these slides, but definitely not those about structured water, because they weren't available at the time, at the conference on autism that was held last September, called Autism One. Why? Because there is a link between autism and EMFs. So all this might be of interest also for those who deal with autism. Now, we chose to study a particular parameter that is very easy to study, very easy to objectivize, that is heart rate variability. Why? Because it is known for almost 10 years. The radiation from wireless technology affects the blood, the heart, and the autonomic nervous system. And the HRV is a very good tool, very easy, rather inexpensive to measure these effects on the autonomic nervous system, the heart, and the functioning of the balance between the autonomic and the sympathetic nervous system. The heart rate variability, or HRV, is the physiological phenomenon of variation in the time interval between heartbeats. Low HRV is a predictor of mortality or low life expectancy, independent of the cause, because it has been demonstrated the range of conditions is associated with low HRV, from congestive heart failure to diabetic neuropathy, poor survival in premature babies, fatigue severity, and chronic fatigue syndrome. So no matter what the underlying cause is, low HRV is a bad omen, is a predictor of mortality. On the contrary, high HRV, because it reflects increased parasympathetic activity, is a predictor of good life expectancy. So essentially, you want to have a high HRV. You don't want to have a low HRV. And again, years ago, this article was published in 1996. Think about it. Heart rate variability was demonstrated to be affected by EMFs. So it has been known for decades that EMFs, they do negatively affect HRV. They decrease HRV, and because of this, they're associated with poor outcomes. And of course, in addition to any underlying condition, poor outcomes and poor survival and increased probability of death. And as far as mobile phones are concerned, this article, much more recent, described the effects of the duration of mobile phone use on HRV in healthy subjects. So actually, there is a dose response curve. The more you use your iPhone or any other brand of mobile phone, and the more you're exposed to EMFs, and the lower is the HRV. So now another interesting point is that HRV can be easily monitored using wearable devices like the Apple Watch or some Garmin device or many other brands that you can wear like a watch, like a wristwatch, or you can even wear like a ring. So it's very easy to measure and to collect the information about the HRV. So we asked some subjects exposed to common EMFs in their homes to monitor their HRV during sleep. Why during sleep? Because during sleep is when you have the greatest disturbance of the biorhythm due to EMFs. It is a common knowledge that you shouldn't keep your cell phone next to your head while you're sleeping. You shouldn't look at the computer before going to bed. I mean, this is common knowledge. And this is because EMFs, they particularly affect our brains while we are asleep. So these are the, again, objective results published in peer-reviewed article demonstrating how after 1 week up to 5-6 weeks of use of the Presidium, the HRV goes up and reaches a plateau. So this also means that you're able to observe results, objective results, within 1 week of assumption of this tool of ours, and this further confirms its effectiveness as an inner shield. And we are accumulating more and more data to show in a future publication how this is a common effect that is independent of age, gender, level of exposure. As I said, protection comes from the inside. The tool is able to distinguish between good and bad EMFs, only repairs and reverts the damage of the bad EMFs, and of course, leaves completely intact all the benefits of the good EMFs. And then, of course, you have subjective reports. My good friend Jami has collected them and has them in the website of this product. So here you can read a number of reports, and these are real people. These are not fake reports. These are absolutely real. We know most of them personally, and we can guarantee that all these testimonials are absolutely true. In the Presidium Life website, you can also find a number of other information about the Presidium, how it was born, how it works, what is biological quantum entanglement, the biological effects of 5G, hypersensitivity to EMFs, and so on and so on. Now, this is my last slide, and I take this opportunity to thank you so much for this great opportunity. For those who are not familiar, this is a Sedona, just north of where I'm living now, where it is said, I don't know whether this is true or not, there are vortexes of positive energy. So this is my last slide. And again, I thank you so much for this great opportunity to share with you these results of ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely high above our pay grade, Dr. Rugerrio. I got a message here about where to find your product.
Well, not yet at Walmart, hopefully soon. I think you have to order it online.
Okay. Yeah, I see there's a website there. So if you could put it in the, Nick, can you put it in the chat there too? Okay, there you go. Great.
Dr. Clearfield, on our website, www.presidium.life is where we do retail sales. We also offer practitioner pricing. And certainly if a group or even just one practitioner wants to make a purchase of Presidium to use in their practice, we're able to offer some wholesale pricing, and you're welcome to get in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Okay. All right. And the dose is what, once a day? Is that it?
Well, here, let me interfere. Dose, of course, it has to be calibrated on a number of factors, body weight and level of exposure. If we are talking about, let's say, a person who is, I don't know, 180 pounds and has a normal level of exposure as I have, because, you know, I'm surrounded by computers, by iPhones, but I'm not near a nuclear power plant. I'm not working as a radiologist right now. So let's say that my exposure is fairly common. I would say 1 capsule per day before bedtime is the good ideal initial dose. And for most people, that's what you need. Different is if we're talking about elevated exposure. Let's say, for example, you're undergoing a radiotherapy for cancer. In that case, you want to maximize the protection against radiotherapy in your healthy cells, at the same time maximizing the killing effects of those radiations on the cancer cells. In that case, I would recommend 2 capsules per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. And then following your doctor advice, you can go up to 3, but I think it's very rare. 2 is the highest dose that I would recommend under normal circumstances. Or let's say that you work in a nuclear power plant. I don't live nearby, but there is one about halfway between here and California. A place I think is called Palo Verde, close to the Colorado River near the California border. And over there is a big nuclear power plant handled by the Salt River Project administration, whatever. So if you work there, or if you live nearby, then again, you are not exposed to the common EMFs that we have here in Southern Arizona. And then I would say 2 capsules per day. So again, there is not a fixed dose like anything else in medicine, but I would say a good starting point for the majority of people is 1 capsule before bedtime. And you will observe an improvement in sleep patterns. And if needed, you can go up to 2 capsules per day, but in most cases, it is not needed.
All right. We'll always be asked about side effects.
No side effects, except if you are allergic to one of the components that is listed in the label. So in the label, we have listed all the components, and unless you're allergic or intolerant to one of those components, we have not observed any side effect on thousands of subjects examined or observed thus far.
Okay. Question from Dr. Nick: Should we test the EMFs around us, especially if we live near high power tension lines or 5G towers?
Well, this is something very interesting. I thank you for this question. Being a radiologist, I adhere to the concept of ALARA. ALARA is an acronym that stands for as low as reasonably achievable. So I try not to expose myself to EMFs unnecessarily. Presidium works regardless of the nature and regardless of the characteristics of the EMFs. So whether it is 5G, whether it is ionizing radiations, power plants, or whatever else, it works always in the same manner, because if the EMF is harmless, if the EMF is at a ratio or a dose that is harmless, simply doesn't do anything, doesn't interfere. But if the EMF is harmful, whether because it is an ionizing radiation, whether because it is a radon coming from your basement, whether because it is a 5G or a cell tower or power plants, then it works. And Presidium doesn't, Presidium and all its components, of course, don't care where the danger comes from. They simply fix and repair almost immediately the damage inflicted by those EMFs. So for the functioning of the Presidium, it's not necessary to know the nature, the exact nature of your exposure or your level of exposure. Bearing in mind, of course, that you want to be exposed as little as possible, following the principle of ALARA. So it's not necessary. Of course, if you know your level of exposure, you can defend yourself, maybe moving away, maybe trying to use some trick to get rid of the radon if you have radon coming from your basement or things like this. But again, it is not necessary for the functioning of the Presidium. Could be very useful to determine your level of exposure and to do something to decrease your level of exposure.
Okay. I had a good friend who was a radiation oncologist, and you know, they always wore those little badges. Dosimeter
for X-rays. Yeah,
right.
I wore it for years and years. I know them very well.
Would the Presidium be useful for these folks?
For radiologists or technicians, absolutely so. If I had it in my days of my youth, I would have used it 2 capsules a day, because I knew that regardless of all the precautions, we were exposed. We hope in the concept of hormesis, we hope that we were exposed below the threshold of danger, and actually those radiations did something good. But just to let you know something, like an anecdote of my youth, of my infancy. By the way, my father as well was a radiologist, and since I'm 65, you can imagine how old would have been my father. Unfortunately, he died in 2006. And my father was one of the first radiologists in Italy, that is in Europe, soon after World War II. And when I was born in 1956, my mother had a common side effect of lactation, that is mastitis, inflammation of the mammary gland. And it was cured in those days by ionizing radiations, by radiotherapy. So radiotherapy in those days, in 1956, was used for a number of things that today would be anathema. That is to treat inflammation, and of course it worked. To treat arthritis or shoulder pain, people underwent radiotherapy with full dose, the same dose that we use today in cancer therapy. So my mother told me that I was drinking radioactive milk. My mother's milk was radioactive. Actually, it was not, because her mammary gland was irradiated, but probably some milk also received some good dose of X-rays. So to go back, if I could, I would have used the Presidium when I was wearing those badges. Today, I'm not working as a radiologist any longer, but I would use it if I were a radiologist or a technician.
Do you think when you take the oral probiotics, which is the kind of bacteria, the Presidium that you take, does it communicate and speak with the skin probiotics, or do you need to have apply a topical cream?
Yes, that's a very good point. In the long run, but here we're talking about weeks, if not months, they will communicate with the microbes of the skin, but it will take them long. With a Presidium cream, of course, you have a topical application, so you have a most immediate effect on the cells of the skin subcutaneous. In the long run, it works. In the long run, they communicate. I can tell you this because of some experience we did with other probiotics. That is, I mean, we are among doctors, so we can talk about not so pleasant things. That is body's odor. You know real well that our sweat is odorless. It stinks when it is metabolized by bacteria. So it's odorless in itself, but it stinks because the bacteria, the product of metabolism of the bacteria, when they metabolize our sweat, the molecules in our sweat, it's stinky. At least we perceive it as stinky. With another probiotic of ours, this was an experience of about 10 years ago. After a couple of weeks of assumption of this probiotic, people began to notice that their sweat was not stinking any longer in the absence of any deodorant or other things, simply because you change the composition also of the skin microbiome, but it takes longer. So based on this experience that has been repeated over and over again, I can tell you that the microbes that you introduce with the Presidium, in the long run, they will also help those microbes on the skin, and they will also transfer this resistance. But if you want any immediate effect, then you need a topical application like a cream or a lotion.
Do you have topical application, or you just take the probiotics, the capsule that you have, and break it in hair gel or face cream?
Not yet, not yet. This is a project that my good friend Jami is involved about. Not yet. The Presidium came out only a few months ago.
So can I take the Presidium and just put it in my hair gel and put it in my hair so I can protect my brain?
You can open the capsule, you can do so. It's not prohibited. Be careful not to make a scrub, because the microbes inside and all the components, they're not smooth. So, or if you want to make a scrub, I mean, it could be useful in some cosmetic appliances. But yes, there is absolutely no contraindication in doing so.
Next question is, what is the best EMF tester?
I have no idea. There are so many.
Not on yours. Okay.
You have to ask an engineer. This is outside my field of competence.
Has it been compared to spore probiotics?
It's a completely different concept. Here, first of all, we have no spore probiotics here. And here, the probiotics are just a tool. So if you want a good probiotic, take the other product of mine, the Bravo, it's good. But here, the probiotics are just a tool, tool to transfer the radiation resistance. And the structured water, Cherenkov radiation, all these things, they participate, they contribute to the efficacy of the product, where the probiotics, they are there because they exert a function, not because they are probiotics. Again, there are so many probiotics around. If you need a probiotic, actually the Presidium is kind of wasted as a probiotic because it has a very specific function.
Okay.
The other thing besides swallowing it, going to the guts, can you also do it for the mouth? Just open it in the mouth or chew it so you can have probiotic for your mouth?
You could do this. Even better would be if you open the capsule and you use it sublingually. However, this is a big however, we can't say this because the Presidium is classified, at least by the US FDA, as a supplement, and supplements are supposed to be taken orally, to be swallowed. Even though this might sound kind of strange, if you put something under your tongue, of course, you are kind of eating it, you're putting it in your mouth, but under tongue, it becomes a drug, because sublingual administration is for drugs, not for supplements. Of course, it's not forbidden for you to do it, but we cannot advertise this.
Okay, next question. Are there any companies you recommend for structured water?
No, I would recommend to take a look at Professor Pollack website. He's kind of the father of structured water, and move on from there. If you take Presidium, you do not need any structured water. Structured water will be formed inside your body. Drink some good water, preferably spring water, but whatever water you drink, whatever water is inside your body, the Presidium will structure it.
Okay. This is from Kathy Cook, who is an electromagnetic radiation specialist. Since the probiotic strains are proprietary, can we find out a little bit more about the specific strains?
Absolutely so. Since here it would be too long to list all 300 of them, my recommendation is go to those papers. They are listed one by one.
Okay. And then she asked if she would like to know more specifics if it's safe for certain clients with GI issues. So are there certain classes of patients that would have other than someone who might be allergic to whatever's
not that we have observed. Actually, a few of those probiotics, they come from previous research, and actually were successfully used in Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, patients with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or other inflammatory bowel diseases. Again, this is not the main indication for the Presidium. Thus far, we have not observed any contraindication, any side effect on this type of patients. But again, history is a hard teacher. So if we're talking about subjects with this type of health disease, always use extreme caution. And this applies to every supplement, every approach.
Okay. Other than EMF exposure, are there any other medical conditions that Presidium is good for?
Chemotherapy. For the very simple reason, the chemotherapy exerts the same identical damage as radiotherapy as far as cells and molecules are concerned.
Okay. And also, I am interested if there was any research done on this product in relation to VGCCs, volt-gated calcium channels, since that is a primary mechanism of how EMFs affect the cell membrane.
Not yet. We are working in our Sys lab to establish an experiment to check for voltage dependent channels. This is something I worked with in my youth when we were working on the mechanism of memory, long-term potentiation in the hippocampal slices. These are very complex experiments, and so we are working with patch clamp and other types of techniques, but we have not done it yet. I'm fully transparent here.
Okay. That's all the questions I have in the chat. Anybody else have any questions, comments? We can't thank you enough, Dr. Rugerrio. This was, head and shoulders, above our, our expectations. Before we go, though, I have to ask you this. Behind your left shoulder, from where I'm looking, you have a very interesting something on the wall back there. What is that? Is that a drawing? Is it behind you? that a
So it's
drawing?
something
Is that,
very simple. It's my grandson, 2 years old. One of the first drawing he had in kindergarten, and he lives in Italy. And
Mhm.
my daughter just sent me a few weeks ago. So first drawing of my grandson.
there you go.
So
Okay.
fruit of his electromagnetic fields in his little brain.
Well, I'll tell you what. So I don't know. Can you see that over my shoulder there? You see that, the colored thing?
Yes, yes, I
Right
do.
there. That my daughter, when she was 6, drew that. That's a portrait of herself.
Oh,
She brought it home
congratulations. Very
from
beautiful.
school. She was 6, and the teacher had her lay down. They outlined it, and they gave her paints, and I carry it with me wherever I go. So I just
That's
had a
excellent.
comment. So that's what you'll get in 4 years. So
Right.
okay. I really can't thank you enough. I got a standing ovation for you from
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ortel.
Thank you.
We can't thank you enough, and we will be in touch.
Sure.
You know, we are absolutely amazing from Dr. Peterson. You know, we're kind of awestruck here. So
Thank you so much.
This group isn't usually this quiet. I have to tell you. So
I am humbled and
they're-
flattered by your comments. And at this point, I think it's inevitable to see all of you at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas next spring.
Okay, I will send you in the next day or so. Unfortunately, my system with all that information in it is on the fritz, and I hope it's not lost. I will send you all the. I will. We have your contact. I will get in touch with you and your folks, and we will make sure that we get you there and get you the VIP treatment. So
Thank you so much.
okay.
And thank you
Thank you
again.
all.
Thank you
Okay,
all.
anybody? Next week, we have Dr. Luis Martinez. He's going to speak to us on senolytics. And that was a hot item at the AMMG conference a couple of weeks ago in Dallas, which I missed because I was doing my own thing. So we'll see you next week, same time, same station. Be on the lookout, and please, we need some registrations. We still have a few speaking spots left open for March. It will be virtual and in person, but we like in person, God willing. And again, Dr. Rugerrio and your sidekick there, thank you so much for being with us. And please, we'll want to be hearing from you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
And bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
So goodbye.
Good night and thank you.
Good night.
That's amazing. You both have kids paintings behind.